Welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. This is episode 542. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility since 2005 through this medium. Today's episode is part 2 of Mental Health Awareness Month. And what I wanted to do is infuse the Tranquility du Jour tenets into this, kind of thinking about, okay, how do things like mindfulness, creativity, compassion, style, and wellness help our mental health, of course, and beyond? So I wanted to weave that in as I think about and kind of tie a bow around May as Mental Health Awareness Month. Now, of course, mental health awareness continues throughout the entire year, but I love that there is a month that's dedicated to this. So again, I wanted to tie in, how do these 5 tenets infuse our days and our lives with deeper connection to who we are and who we want to be, how we want to show up, especially at a time when there's a lot of transition happening. So dive in. I want to make sure you have your journal and you have everything you need nearby as you listen to today's episode. Also, want to remind you to please subscribe to the podcast via Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Amazon, of course, any other player you may use. And then if you have a moment to pin a review, I'd be so grateful. You'll find a how-to over at kimberlywilson.com/podcast. And again, my hope is that it helps other people find more tranquility in their everyday. Now, those of you who might be new to Tranquility du Jour, a huge welcome. And you can find out more at kimberlywilson.com/new. Also, a few things that are coming up this summer. We've got June 20th. We will welcome summer with our TDJ Live Masterclass, our seasonal free event. Would love to have you join. You can sign up. There is a link in the show notes, which can be found at kimberlywilson.com/542. Also, if you would like to do some mid-year reflection, this retreat I find to be so helpful because it's mid-year, obviously, July 10th, and we just kind of hit the pause button and reflect on, okay, how has the year felt so far? What are we hoping for as the rest of the year unfolds? And I think this is a really important time to be doing that as things continue to reopen and our lives continue to kind of return to some semblance of normalcy. Also, the TDJ Lifestyle e-course, if you would like to explore these 5 tenets in more depth, will be opening for kind of a back-to-school launch, and that'll happen in September. So join the waitlist for that if you're interested. And also, if you'd like to be part of the TDJ Tranquility du Jour Passholder Collective, which gives you access to basically about 35 events each year, including the 4 virtual retreats, which are 3-hour events, would love to have you. And that will open later this year. So there's a link in the show notes to join the wait list for that. All right. Now, without further ado, I want to dive into the tenets. Okay. So I also want to do a little defining about what is tranquility. You know, I think for so many people, tranquility is really thought of as like, oh, it's what happens when I'm on vacation or, you know, sitting on a mountaintop meditating or at the beach or sitting by a lake or, you know, things along those lines, which are lovely, of course. And yet, my idea is, how do we find tranquility in the chaos and the mundane minutia of everyday life? So the dictionary defines tranquility as the quality of calm. Right. So I kind of wanted to elaborate on that. And I like to define it as the quality of calm within a full and meaningful life. And I say full because with regard to tranquility, you know, it doesn't mean like, oh, I just focus on one thing or I lead a very quiet life, which is all lovely. But you can also have your hands in many cookie jars, so to speak, and also, you know, have a very full abundance, life. And what I mean by that is you are doing many things, right? You're involved in many things. So I like to emphasize that. Of course, full varies from person to person, what that might look like or feel like, particularly at different stages or seasons of our lives. But the idea is that, tranquility is not just like the removal of everything. It's really about getting yourself in the middle of it all and still having a dose of tranquility. And then I also say within a full and meaningful life, because we don't want just full for fullness sake, right? Meaning we don't want to just have tons of stuff on our plate and on our calendars. And, it's like, oh, I have a full life and I meditate, so everything's great. It's like, no, we want to have a full and a meaningful life, meaning we are contributing to others in some way. We are contributing to the environment, to the animals, to society, to our families, to our communities, to ourselves, right? So what does it look like to you, completely individual, of course, to explore or contemplate tranquility as the quality of calm within a full and meaningful life? So again, full means active by using my time and energy on what brings me alive, while meaningful means I'm contributing to the bigger picture and making a difference in some small way. That can start from the family level and go to community, go to national, international, global, environmental, blah, 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 right? So really expanding it. And yes, self-care is important. To find tranquility so is getting out there and using our voices. All right, so that's this idea of tranquility in a nutshell. And if you think about it, how does that apply to our mental health? Well, I'm going to give you some kind of tangible ideas on that, but it's also in order to have a sense of kind of groundedness, that happens within a strong kind of mental health practice. Tranquility is an important piece. And because whenever I think of mental health and when I think of tranquility, I think of this idea of really needing to get grounded. And of course, there's many different practices that help, particularly helping with anxiety, depression, relationships, things along those lines. So let's start with the first tenet, which is compassion. And I love this one because, compassion, of course, it begins within, with ourselves. And then how do we take that and expand that out and beyond? So one thing to keep in mind is no one is perfect. And what really matters is our intention and our effort. So acknowledge your accomplishments, your small successes, and really for simply showing up, which sometimes that is all you've got, and that's enough. So, one of the things I've encouraged for years is that you have this kind of like gratitude file of sorts, and basically snail mail that you receive that are love notes, emails that you receive thanking you for a job well done or a presentation that made an impact. Those just like really sweet comments that we can get from time to time, and we read them and we glaze over and we're like, oh, that's nice. And then we move on and then we get one negative and that's what we focus on. So if you can keep some sort of a folder or a file where you pull these together as a reminder for when you're feeling a bit down or, you've had a blunder. It's like, okay, I may have made a mistake, and I also know that I have done wonderful things and have had an impact on others in these ways, right? So that can be a really helpful piece so that we continue to acknowledge those baby steps and those kind words that we receive. Again, this can be hard copy, this can be soft copy. Sometimes what I'll do actually is I'll cut and paste pieces from an email that are just very sweet. One woman had lived in the DC area for many years, maybe 2 decades, and she was moving to another city. And she sent me an email, just so thoughtful that I cut and pasted the whole thing and saved it into an Evernote file, basically saying that I had had a really big impact on her, and that when she was contemplating, how to handle a situation, she would ask herself, what would Kimberly do? Which made me feel so good. I was blown away. I had no idea I had an impact like this on this woman. And for her to take the time to write and tell me that was just so thoughtful. So it wasn't one of those things where I just wanted to reply and say thank you so much and we'll miss you and all this sort of stuff. I wanted to do that and save this to come back to for those moments when I get an email that isn't as kind or pleasant or, for whatever reason. So compassion. Make a difference also. A way that helps our mental health is making a difference for others, right? Volunteering, donating, being an awareness raiser. In what ways, particularly as we do come out of this pandemic, can you be an awareness raiser for social justice, for animal rights, for whatever it is that really resonates with you? Of course, with compassion, I think about eating more plants. It's funny, I'm going to be going away later this week for a little bit, and I have a container and a half of tomatoes. And I'm like, I am determined to consume you all before I go. Some of them I've had for quite a few weeks, but I'm like, I'm going to eat you all because I don't want to waste them, right? So, and I'm like, I am going to be consuming a lot of tomatoes over the next few days. So you think about in what ways can you get more plants into your life? An example. Last night I was out to dinner with a friend and we were having enchiladas and I had a spinach enchilada and a veggie enchilada. So it's in what ways can you get more plants into your diet? Kind of even secretively, it's meaning that you don't have to have a salad, right? You could have other things such as an enchilada, a burrito, things like that you can fill with vegetables, plants. Practice self-compassion. And treat yourself as you would a dear friend. Notice the way you talk to yourself. Again, there was just that recent Tea with Kimberly episode that you'll find over on the YouTube channel where I talk a bit more about this, pulling from the work, of course, of Dr. Kristen Neff. Of course, with compassion, we think of sustainability, composting, going zero waste, visiting and frequenting farmers markets, supporting slow fashion, and of course, standing for social justice. All right, so the next tenet is creativity. Creativity. This is a tenet that is near and dear to my heart. I mean, all 5 of these are, clearly, which is why I narrowed it down to this. But creativity is a way to let our daily decisions be a chance to express our creative spark and our personal style. So from what we eat to what we wear, how we communicate, how we spend our time, what we write with and what we write on, what we read, how we set up our space, what we eat. And really, if you think about it, how we show up is our art. And each day is a fresh canvas. And you know what? Sometimes the day may not start out that great. For example, it's a slow start for me today. Yesterday was a capsule wardrobe fashion shoot. Those are so much fun, and they also take a ton of prep and a ton of energy to pull off. So yesterday's was 3-ish hours, but all the prep was hours of prep that went into it, etc. So I just found myself this morning waking up quite sluggish, right? So if you think about creating this fresh canvas, it's all right, so maybe the day is a fresh canvas. Maybe it started out a little slower than I would like. It's okay, each moment you could even think of it as a fresh canvas. It's okay, how do I want to create my afternoon? How do I want to create the rest of this week? It's thinking about it from a bigger picture perspective and then funneling it down. So, as you think about kind of mental health with regard to creativity, creativity is something that just fuels us in so many ways. And there's really great studies out there on the importance of trying new things, doing things differently. If we're right-handed, writing with our left hand. Of course, there's art freaking therapy. I mean, hello. There's art journaling, which is quite therapeutic. And studies have shown that it lowers our stress response. I mean, things along those lines are fodder to remember the power of these practices on our overall health. creativity. The next one is mindfulness. All right, so this is probably super obvious as to how this helps with mental health, but let me give you a few ideas. All right, so slowing down and simplifying. And I know that might seem counterintuitive as I gave my definition of tranquility, which to me is full, right? But full to one person is very different than full to another. So know that slowing down and simplifying, it does not have to, mean that like, oh, I just have tons of leisure time and I don't do much. That's of course not it at all. But, during the pandemic, I feel like we had to slow down in certain ways. I know some people's lives kind of sped up if they were working from home and they were homeschooling and, all that sort of stuff. But for many people, lives kind of slowed down a bit. I mean, there were just less options. And I think a lot of people are really appreciating that. There's an article that came out in the New York Times today. And let's see, the title of it, which you may find interesting, is, it actually came out on May 17th. Filling your summer calendar, slow your roll. Are you completely vaccinated and eager to pack your schedule to the brim? Ease up, turbo. Downtime is good for you. Ease up, turbo. Downtime is good for you. I love that. So I'll put a link to this in the show notes. And a friend of mine just sent this to me today. And so if you think about this idea of slowing down and simplifying, what does that look like for you? I think many people are eager to be out and about. Totally get it. And yet, are there certain things like, hosting an annual event or a family dinner or things that you just always did because you'd always done them that you're like, you know what? I don't want to do that anymore. I definitely have some of those. And I think it's been quite insightful. And there's no way I would have figured that out without the pandemic. And one, I have to confess, after 20 years of leading international retreats, I think I'm done. Now, I mentioned this at the 500th podcast episode, our live event that we did last summer, but I still plan to do a few because they were already scheduled. Well, Paris was supposed to be next month. That was canceled because didn't know if we'd be able to get back into the country. And then I have Italy next year, and yet I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that one. So, and when I say be able to do it, I mean energetically. So kind of with that, I would have never thought ever to take a break from international retreats. I have loved them. I've been doing them for so many years. But then, taking a step back, I'm like, when I go to these places, I want to go and not have to be on and, or host, I love hosting, and yet hosting takes so much out of me. So I'm like, why not take a step back from some of these things? And I have to wonder, have you too experienced this through the pandemic? And now as we're coming out the other side of like, I don't really want to do that anymore. Or, that doesn't serve me anymore in the same way. Also, of course, with mindfulness, I think what's helpful from a mental health perspective is surrendering what you can't control. And then pausing to notice your thoughts, your feelings, your physical sensations. And, taking some of those thoughts to court when you're like, oh my gosh, nobody likes me, or nobody wants to hang out with me, or, all these things that we can come up with. It's like, okay, if you took that thought to court, do you know beyond a reasonable doubt that that is true? It's like, no. Maybe you have evidence because 2 friends weren't available last weekend. Okay, that doesn't mean nobody wants to hang out with you. Right? Isn't it funny the way our minds go? Stay present. So be in the moment as much as possible. And that helps to ease anxiety, and it can help with depression. But anxiety is often, fear about the future, right? So what if we just stayed in what it is we're doing? Also, reminding yourself by saying to yourself, the story I'm telling myself is because so-and-so wasn't available this weekend to hang out. Nobody wants to hang out with me. Okay, that is not an accurate story. So coming up with this phrase of like, the story I'm telling myself is ... And reframe these stories that you replay about the past and the worries that you create for the future. What's a different way to look at it? Okay, maybe so-and-so was busy. Maybe so-and-so didn't feel good, or what didn't feel up to going out for tea. Versus like, oh my gosh, nobody likes me, right? Acknowledge your emotions. It's really important to notice those emotions. Pay attention to them. Name them. Helps to calm the amygdala down. And to give voice to them. Also to remember emotions are passing. They're not going to be with you forever. They're going to change. It's like Pema Chodron's quote, like, we are the sky, everything else is like the weather patterns. Also practicing stop, which I mentioned in part 1 of this mental health awareness series, which is stop, take a breath, observe what's happening, proceed with awareness. I also want to mention HALT, which is another acronym. And this is something to just notice whenever you're feeling a little off. You're like, okay, am I HALT? Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? And that can be helpful to just check in, like, what's going on? Because those are 4 things that can definitely have a ripple effect. All right, let's talk wellness. So we have 2 left, wellness and style. All right, wellness. Gratitude, being grateful for what it is we have, right? It's so easy to see what we're missing, what we don't have. Totally normal. So we have to really force ourselves. And that's why in the daybook, the Tranquility du Jour daybook, there's even a section every week for gratitude. What are you grateful for this week? What are you grateful for this day, this moment? Of course, meditation, which falls under mindfulness also. Eating well, journaling, sleeping, reaching out to others. So reconnecting. And I see so many photos of people that are like, it's the first time I've seen so-and-so in 14 months, right? And it just can feel so good. It was so nice. I had a pretty social weekend, which I have to say I'm really exhausted from, but it was people I hadn't seen in quite a while and I won't be able to see for a little bit. And it was just such a delight to like hug them and have masks off and, you know, just like be connected in this way that we used to. Of course, exercising, so good from a wellness perspective. And maybe if you can, think of starting each day with 10 minutes of writing, reading, or yoga instead of jumping right into the phone, right? Or right into work. Setting up those routines. Vanna O'Connor says, routine is a condition of survival. I love that because I do think routine can just help set us up for success. You know, for me, I'm very much like I build my weeks around my ballet classes, right? And around my clients. So for you, what are your kind of like anchors? That's the word I'm looking for. What are your anchors that you build your days around? Of course, the reading, as I mentioned, listening to music, decluttering, being a lifelong learner, napping. Oh my gosh, napping. I recently took a nap when I was home in Oklahoma, and I don't think I'd napped in quite a while. And like, a long while. And it felt so good because I remember in college, I used to nap every day. And I thought, what am I going to do in the real world when I can't nap? And now it's like harder for me to nap, you know, like midday to just pause and lie down. But I was able to do it in Oklahoma and I woke up and I was just like so refreshed. There's something decadent about napping. All right, so that's from a wellness angle. And of course, everything we've talked about with regard to mental health, you know, falls into this because these basics that I mentioned in part 1 of this series, very, very important as we think about, all right, how can I take really good care of myself from a wellness perspective? And then also, how can I make sure that this will have a ripple effect into my days, into how I show up in the world. All right, so our last one, style, which is super fun, super playful, and it's not just about clothing by any means. All right, so style. I encourage you to think about surrounding yourself with beautiful things. And what I mean by that is things that are beautiful to you, aesthetically pleasing to you, not to Pinterest, not to people you follow on Instagram, to you individually. So for me, it's things like flowers. Like I look around, I've got some pink flowers. I've got some white lilies. Well, they're white and pink. They're stargazers. I've got some white, and I forget what these are called, but they last for like weeks and weeks and weeks. Beautiful little flowers that I got at the grocery store. And And then, of course, plants. I mean, I'm surrounded by maybe 15, 20 plants, right? And I live in a tiny place, so these are all around me, and they just make me happy. And the data shows that it actually does enhance moods in offices and homes. Art, of course, art, love art. And even though I don't have original art, of course, I do have one beautiful painting of a pig by a local artist. But, art is in I love or postcards. If I go to an exhibit, like the Degas at the Opera exhibit that I saw in Paris and DC, I want to buy little note cards and postcards, and then I'll frame them or set them out or put them on a bulletin board, things along those lines. Plants, which I mentioned, twinkle lights, obsessed, and trinkets from travel, things that feel good. On my desk right now, I'm looking at these two beautifully hand-painted trays that are from Italy, right? So just these little things that just help remind you of moments. So that is style. In addition, I think the piece to also keep in mind is with regard to style, which, comes to mind of what we were shooting yesterday is like a capsule wardrobe, right? So how to make your daily dress, because we have to get dressed every day. Even if we're not seeing people, we're still probably wearing clothes. And so it's like how to make it as easy and comfortable and seamless as possible. So really thinking of a capsule wardrobe. And that, of course, can be anywhere from 10 to 40 pieces. Those of you who are at the TDJ Style pop-up, I will put a link to that, by the way, in the show notes so that you can see that for anyone who wasn't able to join. I recorded it and shared it, but I talk all about how to build a capsule wardrobe. Also, when we think of style, keep in mind that Carolyn Mayer, who is a behavioral psychologist and the author of The Psychology of Fashion, she says that mood and clothing are interconnected. And you probably notice this. I mean, even now people are starting to get dressed a little bit more. Like I'm wearing lipstick. For a while, I would wear lipstick, of course, on my video calls, but, out walking the dog or what have you. I mean, I always had a mask on, so I wouldn't need it. And now it's like such a treat to be able to wear it, put it on again, to wear shoes beyond flip-flops and, a super comfy pair of boots. So the fact that mood and clothing are interrelated, it's like, how do you want to show up in the world now? And, we've been out of the world to a degree for 14 months. So this can also be a time of reinvention. So, for me too, it's all about red lips. I love red lipstick. A scent. Do you have a signature scent? By the way, Tranquilité, which is my signature scent that I created in Paris, I'll put a link to that also in the show notes. I only have a few of those left. We are down to the wire. And so what I'm going to do is actually probably send a note to people who have supported it in the past to let them know that we're down to, I think, about 8 eau de toilettes and maybe 20 of the roll-on parfums. So if you guys are interested in those, definitely check those out. And I have them numbered with inventory. So just so you know, if you want to go in, you'll be able to grab one before they all go. Again, if you're interested, no pressure. I just wanted to mention that because signature scent, I think, is just so lovely. And I love oils just because they linger. Of course, scarves. I love me some scarves. They're so great over your head, around your wrist, around your head bag, around your neck, etc. Oversized sunglasses, very much love those. Leopard print coat, things along those lines. And find and muse. It might be Audrey Hepburn. It might be there's an amazing documentary out, I hear. I haven't watched it yet, but on Netflix, I believe, about her. Jackie O, Beyonce, Rachel Zoe. And thinking about, are you more of a classic, modern, eclectic, bohemian? So considering your personality, your body type, and your lifestyle as you think about your quote-unquote signature style. And again, that's from a fashion perspective, but we also think about style from a home and decor perspective. It's funny, I may get some remodeling done in my tiny little kitchen and my tiny little bathroom. I mean, my bathroom must be 20 square feet. It's so tiny. But anyway, it needs some work. And somebody came over and looked at it and they were like, So they were trying to describe, so what is your style that you would want for the kitchen? I wanted to be like, well, how do you describe it? And she was like, it just seems whimsical. I was like, oh. And so I kind of like the French vibe. And she's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I totally see that. I just wasn't sure if that was how you would describe it. So it's just kind of funny, So it's like, well, how would somebody describe your style? Or do you have kind of like a definition for it? And it's okay if you don't. Eclectic totally works too. All right. So those are my ideas as we think about style, wellness. Oh, and let me just mention, okay, why does style matter with regard to mental health? Well, the behavioral psychologist, I think, gave us some good reasons why. Mood and clothing are interconnected. And if you think about it, when you feel pulled together, you feel better. And one other piece too, that Robin Given, who is a writer for the Washington Post, she says fashion is a form of communication that is both intimate and aloof. Without ever uttering a word, you stand behind your message because you are in fact wearing it. Clothing is an eloquent form of communication for the inarticulate. I love that. And so as you think about it, like how is your visual representation? Does it resonate with you? Or are you like, no, I'm going to change my hair color, or no, I'm going to grow my hair out. I'm going to cut it out or cut it short, or I'm going to, move into just wearing tennis shoes. Like those little white tennis shoes are so comfortable and they go with everything. It's like asking yourself, what is the way you want to show up? Because the good news, for a lot of people, they've been out of the office for 14 months-ish. Some people, a lot of people. And so, you can think about it. It's like, go back. This was your chance to kind of like shake it up. How do you want to shake it up? Or do you want to shake it up? Or do you want to go deeper into who you already have been and presenting yourself as? So just some thoughts again there with regard to style. And of course, wellness, we know how that relates to mental health. Mindfulness, also know. Creativity and compassion. So how can I be a voice for the voiceless? Whenever I think about animals, right? Or how can I actually get out there and use my platform of sorts to share ways in which we can support others? So compassion. And, of course, doing good makes us feel better. All right, so those are my thoughts on how the 5 tenets relate. I also wanted to mention one other thing. I was recently interviewed for a blog post on Weekend Made, and I'll put a link in the show notes. But she asked me some really great questions that I think might be helpful as we kind of tie a bow around this idea of tranquility and mental health and these 5 tenets of Tranquility du Jour. So her first question was, that I've been involved in various ventures to bring tranquility to others. And so she asked, how do I bring tranquility into my own life? So I give some examples then. They're really along the lines of basics, right? Good sleep. Must-haves are earplugs, snoring pugs, and satin pillowcases. Daily movement, staying hydrated, reading, downtime, etc. Okay, so that is another way to think about how am I bringing tranquility to myself? What does that look like or feel like? So I encourage you to ask yourself. She also asked, which I thought was really interesting, about tips or practices for people with sensory processing disorders. And so sensory processing disorders is really interesting. So it's like people who are really affected by, things like bright lights, itchy tags, things along those lines. And much, much more. But those were just a few things that stood out to me because it sounded a lot like even a highly sensitive person, right? So I shared, I was like, loud sounds, bright lights, scratchy materials, crowded places can send me and many others into a state of overwhelm. So if you or a loved one have similar issues, it can be helpful to create a comfort kit for your office, on the go, or at home with creature comforts like a soft scarf, lavender oil, earplugs, stress ball, moisturizer, lip balm, weighted blankets. And buy only super soft clothing and textiles. Hello, TDJ, the clothing line. Create a nourishing routine and provide a space to unwind. And sometimes we just have to go to the bathroom to escape and regroup. And of course, spending time in nature. Right, so those are some ideas. And again, I'll have a link to this because there's a few more questions about, how the pandemic changed approaches to tranquility, things like that, that might also be helpful for you as you think about this idea of tranquility in the everyday and Mental Health Awareness Month. Awesome. So, in closing, I just want to say, as always, a big thank you for inviting me into your ears today. And also, I would love to hear from you. You can reach out, hello@kimberlywilson.com. Just let me know how you're doing. How are things as you kind of go through this transition? Be sure and sign up for the June 20th free event. And head on over to the TDJ Insiders Facebook group because we are reading Effortless and enjoying it so far. Not quite done with it, and we just have a few days left of the month. So would love to hear what your thoughts are if you've enjoyed the book. And then also make sure that you're getting your love notes. So I'll get a love note out to you this week. I tend to send them weekly, and they're just little doses of inspiration and links and resources. And then finally, there's links to my planner and 6 books and ways to find me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So thank you, as always, for tuning in. I hope you have a delicious and nourishing week ahead filled with many moments of tranquility. Namaste.